But let me tell you a bit about Amy's impressive background. She is the Vice President of Customer Analytics at Synchrony, where she manages a team of data analysts, data scientists, and agile project teams to scope, analyze, and recommend projects on improving the customer experience. And then to top it all off, she's got an MBA from Auburn University, an MS from Georgia Tech, and a BA from Oglethorpe. And outside of work, Amy is passionate about learning and teaching. That really shows. She currently studies 3 languages and has taken up ceramics. So if we have time, I'm going to have to ask you about that. That sounds fascinating. She also coaches and mentors others on data analytics, cloud AI and ML, and career development, which is exactly why she's here today. And so beyond women tech makers that I've already mentioned, she's also active with a bunch of other amazing programs like AI to Accelerate Inclusion, Anita B, Grace Hopper, and Baddies in Tech, just to name a few. So she's going to tell you all the things that you didn't even know to ask. So I'd like to think of her like our fairy tech mother, sort of guiding you through our career. So pay attention. And without further ado, please join me in giving the warmest welcome to Amy.
Thank you so much for that introduction, as well as really level setting what W2D2 is all about. And so I'm just super excited to talk to everyone about career tips and how you can really work to focus and accelerate your career. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Let's see here. Let me know. All right, I believe the presentation is visible. So is everyone can see the slide deck? Okay, cool, awesome. So, I've already been introduced, so, outside of my work and what I like to do. So I'm actually going to kind of skip over this slide. I am looking to get a new headshot. So if anyone in the chat has a headshot recommendation, please let me know. Just going to throw it out there. But let's talk about the first tip I can recommend to every data analyst and data scientist is that seasonality, that as we know it, right, in data, isn't just for data. So there's an actual seasonality pattern, a trend in hiring that we should all follow. So starting at the end of summer, fall, so think maybe June, end of June, rolling into August, hiring for the rest of the year into next year is in full swing. With that basically happening what we call the September surge. So really end of June, rolling into the end of September, you have what's called a surge. And so this actually aligns greatly with the big tech conference season. So you have a lot of technical conferences happening in around this time. So one of them, Grace Hopper, you have Afrotech. If you have an MBA and you're part of a particular minority group, a lot of those organizations are actually having their conferences. So for example, in my case, the National Black MBA Association had their conference actually a couple of weeks ago. So all this is happening at the same time. So that's where you're seeing this big swing in hiring that's happening. The Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, theirs is happening. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, right? So everything's aligning with this really big swing and big push with tech conferences. So my recommendation is to try and go to these conferences if you can. Now, I know that with the economy, there's a lot of questions around financing and can you go? A lot of organizations, one of them I'm going to throw out is Google, you can apply for a scholarship. And if you get that, they will pay for your attendance, right? So they will pay for you to go to these conferences. And that includes hotel, that includes airline flight, as well as your ticket there. And I will make sure to share that link in the Discord server for everyone to have. And so as you think about what you're going to be doing and what you're planning to do for your career, factor this into that. Say, okay, if I want to go to this conference, I need to apply maybe for one of these Google scholarships at this time, make sure I'm ready to go by this time, and that kind of thing. So then when you get into the winter, so that's basically, think of October, middle of October, rolling into November, that's kind of like your last chance, right? So this is the point where hiring decisions are actually being finalized and budgets are being set for next year hiring. So I say last chance, that doesn't mean you won't get hired. It's just that it becomes a little bit more difficult. So if you're a junior or a senior in school and not looking to move yet, but will start looking to move next year, this is the time when you should start networking now. So you always want to network the year before what you're going to try and do. So if you want a internship at, let's say, Abbeville, right? You want to go work in pharmaceuticals and you want that internship for 2025, you need to start networking with recruiters there and looking at that process, making sure you're ready for it at that point in the winter season. So, and then you roll into winter and the beginning of summer. There's not a lot of hiring at that point. Budgets are settled and hiring is basically kind of like complete. But it's not, again, it's not too late. That's apprenticeships are still available. You can focus on growing yourself and your skills you need for the next time, right? And you continue to network. So I always say that even though you're not hearing a lot back or there's not a lot of things out there, the quiet time is the best time to really focus on yourself and get ready. Because if you're not ready, by the time that next end of summer, fall time happens, you're not going to be ready. You're not going to have that opportunity. So never be upset that you're not hearing back. Take it, say, okay, I've got time now. I've got time to plan. I've got time to get my resume ready. I've got time to get a portfolio, get some really good projects. I've got time to network and use that quiet time to do those things. Now I'll pause there if anyone's got questions on trends in hiring, especially as someone who's acted as a hiring manager. So I've hired for my current team. Any questions on the hiring season, anything I've said, even the interview process?
Yeah, there's no.
There's someone who raised their hand.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
I thought there wasn't a lot of interviewing during the summer because everybody is out on vacation.
So that's not it depends. So I'll say it depends on the company, right? So certain companies will be out on vacation, but really it's more of the budget's been set, right? So I may be out on vacation, but there could still be some hiring. And here's an example of that. So I actually hired a good chunk of my team last summer. And I only hired data analysts and data scientists. So I was interviewing during the summer last year, right? But a good part of the reason why is, number one, it was just there was less competition. So as a hiring manager, I'm going, okay, if everyone's hiring in the fall all the way through, that end of the end of summer, fall season, I'm going to have less competition of getting really good talent in the summer because there's still going to be application, but no one's really hiring, right? Because their budgets are set. So I had that flexibility in my budget to hire at that time. There's also a strong need to really grow my team because of the fact that we were, in some cases, on some certain parts of my team, we needed more people. And in others, I made a good case for expanding the team. So vacation could play into that, but not necessarily. A lot of it is budgeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Mhm.
And
Go for
what's
it.
going, like, after this period, we are now in October, right? So after if we're gonna miss this opportunity, what's gonna happen on the winter? Is it really quiet or?
So winter, it's generally pretty quiet because everyone's going into finishing and solidifying budget and they've already got the head count that they're looking for. But that doesn't mean opportunities are not there, right? There are certain things like apprenticeships. We'll probably start looking for applications for the beginning of the spring. If you're going to start an apprenticeship in the spring, those applications could open in the winter. So if you're looking for like a full-time job with a big name company, the winter is going to be really quiet, but that doesn't mean there are other opportunities are not available to you, right? It's just that those really big ones that you may want to go for may not be open, but you can still consider apprenticeships. Some of those will still be open, especially I believe for the federal government. I know they're ramping up hiring. So you have all those other opportunities as well at that time. But again, to that point about that seasonality, there's not a lot of those out there. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Seems like we're good. So let's go to the next one. So you incorporated. So I say this all the time, and this is one of my favorite quotes. I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. So this was actually said by a famous rapper, it's Jay-Z. You should think about yourself as a business. And your career is really, for you, of course, it's a livelihood, but your skill sets are a product. If you think about yourself that way and how you deliver value to a company, you will definitely be able or be better positioned to manage your career. So, for example, your business, you should give your employee vacations and holidays. That means take your vacation, take your holiday, leave your work phone, your work, whatever you have at home, and take that time. You should have a brand that constantly evolves. And for me personally, that strikes close to home because I originally was not going to even be a data professional. I was going to go be a diplomat. Legitimately, my undergraduate degree is in diplomacy. My master's in science degree from Georgia Tech is actually in like diplomatic science. I took an internship at the Department of State. I was ready for diplomacy. But I evolved my brand after that internship when I realized that wasn't for me and said, okay, well, if I don't like diplomacy or that's not for me right now, but I really like economics and the data part of that, maybe I should go into data. So I changed my brand, but still took that part of me that had spent so many years learning diplomacy and said, but what do I bring to the table that maybe another data analyst or data scientist doesn't? Well, I've got a very strong background in understanding and work with people from different cultures. I'm very good because of that background in understanding and taking data and applying it to politics and policy, which means I can also do that to the business. And so I took those skill sets and said, okay, here's my brand. And here's how I can be successful and help that company to grow. And so as I've continued to progress in my career, my brand has consistently and constantly evolves. You should want to develop a short-term and long-term plans too. Just like any business, a business has a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan. You know, you hear I've got plans for 2030. What's the business plan for 2030? All that fun stuff. You should have those too and look at yourself in that kind of capacity. That doesn't mean, of course, those plans can't change, and they will, but you should at least kind of think about them. And companies network consistently. I cannot tell you how many times where I've worked at a company and I've gone to different conferences and someone's like, oh, I worked with so-and-so and I worked with so-and-so, and they're all in the same field. They're consistently networking with each other and learning from each other. So you should be doing the same thing. But at the same time, right, you do want to grow your career, your business, which is the career conversation. And I can admit these are kind of awkward, right? No one wants to go into a meeting or you're maybe not sure and say, hey, I want to raise, or hey, I want to move to another team. So how do you do that, right? The first thing to do is have an agenda. I cannot stress that enough. Have an agenda and send that to your manager that you're going to meet with. That's going to outline what you want to discuss for this meeting. It level sets the playing field. Everyone goes into a meeting, they know what's going to be discussed. And it really does bring and show you to be very organized and focused in what you're going to discuss. The second is be prepared with facts. So all your accomplishments, whatever your KPIs are for your accomplishments that you're going to measure, have them written out. And not just have them written out, put it together like a story. So if you have a particular KPI, you can say, the situation was this, right? Everyone knows the STAR method. The task that I was assigned to do this is what I did. Here's the result. And here's how it ties into me meeting my goals or my KPIs for, the quarter, right? And have that laid out. I have an entire Word document where I just track this consistently. And I update that at the end of every week. It's like clockwork. I block out 30 minutes of my day at the end of the week to update this consistently. I also will take that once it's been updated and email it to my personal email as a record so I can continue to follow along. Because if something were to happen and let's say I get laid off, at least I have this, right? Because companies will cut off your access like that. It's very quick. So make sure you have something as a record for you to follow. It also makes it easier when you're updating your resume because you already have it written out. Now you just got to, in a way, maybe make it shorter, condense, copy and paste. You also want to work with your manager to develop concrete next steps. So I can't stress enough how many times I've had someone reporting to me and we have a meeting and I go, okay, what's the next step? And I kind of get this, they give me this look like, what do you mean, what's the next step? Legitimately, what's the next step, right? What do you need me to do to help you accomplish what you want to do in your career, right? Because you have to own that career, right? You own your business. And the only thing I can do is do and help you reach that goal at the end of the day. So if you don't have a concrete next step, I don't know what to do myself. So have those concrete next steps at the end of it. And you can compose those in a couple of different ways. What I like to do is that most companies have an internal website that says, let's say you want to go to the next level. Here's the skills you have to demonstrate. So I will say, okay, here's the skills I have to demonstrate. Here's the ones where I think I over-index in. And here's the ones where I need help to show. My manager, talk to my manager, I want to be at this level. I need opportunities to demonstrate these skills to show that I'm prepared for it. Can you help me? Right? I think a mentorship would be great. Like those are the kinds of things that I would suggest and phrase it so that they know, okay, she's looking at it. She understands what she needs to do to accomplish it. And she's got some ideas. And here's how I can help her. That's how you should be thinking about those next steps. Now, and that's if I put that as an example, as if you want a promotion. You don't have to be promoted, right? You don't, it's not a requirement. And I'll get into that in our next section. Just keep in mind that promotions are not always the bee's knees, and they're not always how you can really grow and manage your career. The last thing I do is send meeting notes. If it's not in an email with someone as a recipient, it did not happen, send meeting notes. Also, it's great as a manager myself because I reference those. I'm like, okay, I have an action item here. I remember this. I need to get together because I know this person's going to come back to me and say, hey, I'm asking you for your support to grow my career. Can you help me? Did you do this thing? And the reason why I know that person's going to come back is because I do it. I do it to my manager all the time. And it's like clockwork. So he knows I'm going to ask. So he has meeting notes and he has an action item to follow through on. So always send your meeting notes. So I'll stop there for any questions. And again, don't be afraid to ask me questions, even as if you're like, I want to talk to you as maybe a direct report to a manager. How do I handle this conversation? That's a completely fine question to ask too.
I have a question.
Sure.
But what's the benefit of my manager to help me to leave her team? Like she hired me, right? She wants me to stay to do the work. So why?
That's a good question. So your question is, well, what if I want to rotate to another team? Why would my manager help me leave? Right? That's a fantastic question. And I'm going to put it, there's a couple of reasons why I, as a manager, and why my managers in the past have been like, yep, we're going to help you get out of here. The first is, and it's very self-centered, but it's true. You leaving the team with the skills you have to go to another team to make that team better makes me look good. I cannot stress that enough. I can successfully say, yes, Brittany left my team. And if this was Brittany, thank you for the question. If I mispronounced your name or it's not the right person, I'm so sorry. But Brittany left my team with all these skills and she's successful in this other team. I did that. And that as a leader makes me look ready to lead bigger teams. So top priority, it makes me look good. I know that's mean, but it's true. The second thing is it is harder to hire than it is to retain throughout an entire organization. It costs more money. So as a manager, right, HR is going to come to me and say, this person left because, they couldn't grow and promote their skills and they report to you. Now we've got to spend all this money to get someone to replace them. And that's got to come out of your budget and your cost center. That's expensive, right? So that's number 2. Number 3 is it grows my network. When you move to another team, I can interact now with your new manager leadership team. And it, again, as a leader, and I'll get to this again in the next couple of slides, the bigger that network is that I have, when I'm getting ready to be looking for a next role promotion, it helps me say, okay, I've got sponsors and I've got advocates across the organization that's willing to step in for me because I've interacted with them and I've grown that relationship. And the 4th thing, and this is more personal for me, is I, as a manager, want to see my people happy. So I'm like, yeah, if you want to leave and there's nothing here for you, I'm not going to stop you. Just help me help you get there, right? I can't just say, okay, you want to leave, cool, great, and then just put you in a role, right? You got to help me understand what you're trying to do, what skills you have to get you ready for that role, but also help me make sure the team can be successful without you being there, right? So that's where, and I talk about documentation in so many career conversations. They're like, I want to go to a new team. I'm like, okay, let's talk about what you're owning and managing. Do you have documentation? No, I can't let you go then, because I'm like, well, if you leave, this work still has to go and be done. What's going to happen here, right? I've got SVPs and I've got people high up the chain who want this, but yet you don't document it. So documentation is going to be key for that conversation too. Always have documentation ready to go. I feel like that was a really long answer, but I hope that helped.
I think that was an excellent question.
Yes.
Excellent answer to an excellent question. And I think it was Ina who had asked that question. Ina, right? But Brittany
Ina?
does
Okay.
have a question as well. So I'd love to give Brittany a chance to ask her question.
Yeah, I think that you pretty much answered it with the documentation. I was going to ask, how do you show what you're capable of? Because obviously your manager is super busy and they don't remember everything that you've done. And so you have to, I guess, sort of be your own spokesperson and let your boss know what you have completed and that you are ready for the next level. So that was my question, is how do you show that? And I think you did answer that with documentation.
Documentation is great, but also, and this is what kind of comes off, is you should be doing a good job by default, right? If you're doing a good job, people will recognize that, and that recognition from others is also a way to show you're ready for the next level. So for example, I was working on something and the team I was working with directly, I actually sent a note out to my manager and then my next level saying, Amy was a dream to work with. She was great. She helped me better understand this process. I really appreciate her assistance. This has been amazing. That's another way to show that you're ready for next level, because the fact that I did that and got that feedback shows that I'm mastering what's being taught to me, right? I'm showing that I can do these things. So that's another way too, is to get that feedback. So don't be afraid to ask for it. Say, hey, we worked on this big project. I really had a lot of fun. Can you, and have that conversation with that person. I'd love to have like a 15, 20-minute conversation with you to get some feedback on how I did. What went well, what should I improve on, anything odd out there that you just want to throw out there that doesn't fit in those categories. Put that in your portfolio as well, right? So you can show, hey, you're saying I should demonstrate financial acumen, making that up, right? Someone says, demonstrate financial acumen. Well, I worked with finance to create this kind of financial model, and it was accurate, right? Like 70% of the time. And I also, when I was explaining to them the model, they complimented me on my grasp of the financial terminology. I even got feedback. And here's the feedback that they said. That's another way to demonstrate that and to really build up that case. Any other questions on career? No? Okay. So let's go into, this is my favorite, the great promotion riddle, because this is one that I did not realize until I moved up the corporate ladder when I worked at UPS. I was like, oh, this is kind of awkward. So it is an inverse pyramid. And you can see, because I've got them color coded, right? So the number of jobs at the base of the pyramid versus entry level. So you're going to have more entry level jobs at the base of the pyramid. As you move up, the ladder, you're going to have fewer opportunities. Why is this odd? Because the higher up you go, the more companies are looking for what's called exposure. So they want you to have been able to apply your skills into different areas of the company. So for example, when I worked at UPS, for me to move up the ladder, they were like, okay, for you to be a supervisor, you need to have demonstrated skills in, marketing and sales. I said, okay, well, I'm in marketing products, so I've got both of those under my belt. So that's great. So I moved up to a supervisor. And then it was like, okay, if you want to be a manager, you need marketing, sales, finance, and some responsibility managing a person. And so you look around, you're like, but there's very few jobs. There's not as many jobs out there doing that. But I got lucky because my role expanded when I was in finance and I got one person to report to me. So I moved up as a manager. And as a manager, it was like, all right, if you want to be a director, now you need sales, you need marketing, you need finance, you need to manage a person or a team, which is kind of like HR. And now you need to know and understand the operations. You look around, I'm like, well, where are the jobs that let me do all those things and is operational? There's not a lot out there. So it's an inverse pyramid. As you move up, there's an expectation, you have exposure and doing what you do, applying your skills into all of these different areas, right? As you move up the title ladder, as I like to call it. But the number of jobs that let you have that opportunity to do that is smaller and smaller and smaller. So the question is, well, how do you do that? The first thing is you can obviously just not want to be promoted. There's nothing wrong with that. I tell people this all the time. You do not have to want to be promoted. That's fine. If you love what you do and you like your team and you're constantly being mentally challenged, then me as a manager, when you have that conversation with me, my job is not to say, okay, how do I keep you happy? How do I keep you mentally challenged? That is what my job is to do now. If you want to be promoted, right, and this is like what you're running into, a couple of things you can do. I know people tend to not like these, but a lateral move is completely optional. So you could go from supervisor to supervisor into different business groups. That's fine. As a matter of fact, I recommend that because you don't want to get to a point where you haven't had enough exposure, but you're a VP, because then you're looking around and going, so what, I have to stay in this VP role until it expands, right? Until I get more responsibilities. That can take like 2 or 3 years. So now instead of you moving up at a consistent pace that you were before, now you're stuck maybe sitting in a role in a title for 5 years. So lateral moves are a great opportunity for you to get that exposure. The other thing is to lead from where you are. So those leadership roles and the ERG and the BRGs or even external groups like W2D2 is a great way to show that you are ready and can show leadership potential and exposure, right? Because if you're leading groups and externally outside the organization, you're showing leadership, right? You're managing events, you're project managing, you're showing that you can demonstrate advertising if you're working on advertising and you get a certain number of people, and you can show, oh, not only that, but because I did it and I worked for this company, I gave the company exposure externally. I mean, there's a whole lot of benefits in doing that too as well. And you want to make sure you demonstrate that on your resume or LinkedIn. You want to show the work you're doing and then connect it to your career business, right? Your plan as you move forward. So I'll pause there about the inverse pyramid conundrum.
Yeah,
If anyone has any questions.
Yeah, while people are gathering their questions, I do want to thank you for the nice shout out that if you're not getting the experience within your job, we do have opportunities for volunteer and gaining leadership skills in this organization too. So that's in W2D2. Yes, but I'm sure there's other questions that people, yeah. Adamna, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
How many years of experience do you need to be a volunteer?
Oh, I don't think that's a question for me. I think that may be for
Oh,
the
yeah,
leadership team.
there's no requirements. We're still putting it together, but we definitely need volunteers at all levels. So if you're not already on the community, make sure we connect later on, but we have plenty of opportunities at all levels.
Okay, because I joined the Discord, so when opportunities pop up, you guys will just post it in the Discord?
Yes, we will deal with the operational stuff, but it's all announced through the Discord.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Great.
Any other questions? Oh, I think there's one. I see one. You know?
I have a question. Sorry for a lot of questions. So in LinkedIn, for example, like for a senior positions, I'm having like more jobs than like for entry level. Is there
Can
a
you,
reason?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
So I noticed in LinkedIn, for example, like when I'm searching for a senior data analyst, I am having more jobs than like for data analyst.
So you're saying on LinkedIn, when you search for a senior data analyst, you find more jobs than just a regular data analyst, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a couple of reasons for that, and I'm gonna ballpark guess a few of them. Number one is LinkedIn's out, it's just the algorithm, unfortunately, but which is not something you can deal with. Number two, and these are the more important ones that you can actually deal with, is that organizations tend to conflate what they need, in all honesty. So they're saying, I need a senior person, and then you read the role, and the role is actually not senior level. Or they feel that an entry-level role or entry-level data analyst looks a certain way, when in reality, that's not true, right? So there is a disconnect between basically titles. I have seen roles where I've looked at them like, that's not a data analyst, that's a project manager, but okay. And that's just because within different organizations, they call this role, or those skills are classified a certain way. So there is no set role there's nothing out there that says a data analyst has these skills. As such, all companies should be putting their job postings out there to demonstrate these skills. Unfortunately, that's not true, right? And so that's why if you're searching for senior data analyst roles, you're probably seeing those a lot more because of those kinds of reasons versus the entry-level data analyst roles. That's not to say entry-level doesn't exist, because it does. Entry-level data analyst roles do exist. They are out there. You're predominantly going back to like that first section about the conferences. You hear a lot of those at the conferences. And a lot of those conferences that I know of, at least, companies, at least a few of them, will hire on the spot, right? They hire for entry level on the spot. So that could be another reason why you're not seeing them, is they go to the conference, they hire immediately there. And so then all they need to post is then something higher up from that level. So that's something also to keep in mind too, is all these things kind of tie together in regards to what you're seeing on LinkedIn. Does that help?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Any other questions?
Adamna, do you have another question, or is it still the same question from before, from your hand still up?
Yep. Yeah, sorry. I'm putting my hand down.
Okay. All right. So the network effect. So networking is about people. I say this all the time. And I have seen people do this at conferences. Well, they'll go into what's called the expo hall, which is where all the companies are with their booths, and they will try and get to every booth. Don't do that. Because number one, you're not building a relationship, right? Networking isn't about connecting with just recruiters, but it's about connecting with people. So you need to follow what I call the 3 Bs: be intentional, be open, be honest, right? That's going to get you much farther as you build your network and look for that next career move than anything else you can do. Because, and there's really a couple reasons. And one is, I talk about networking equals people. Recruiters know that too. And I can guarantee you recruiters within different or within the same industry know each other. I promise you they know each other and they talk. So if you want to go into finance and you've networked with like the 4 big banks, those recruiters know each other. They're like, oh, I had this amazing conversation with this person named blah, blah, blah. Really? Yeah. Did you? Yeah. She seemed really wanting to work for us, but she said that with me too. it makes you look bad. It legitimately makes you look bad. So do not do that. Be intentional, right? You're going to go into an expo and you're going to go, okay, there are 3 companies I want. These are they speak to me. I really enjoy their products. These are the 3. I'm going to go, I'm going to talk to the people at those booths, and I'm going to not focus on myself. That's going to be hard. In other words, you're going to go up to that recruiter and you're going to say, hey, you know, let's say examples Nike. Hey, you know what? I'm so glad that you guys are here. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate your Metcon shoes. I use them a lot for weight training, and Nike shoes are really my predominant shoes, and I've used them since I've started my healthy lifestyle journey. And it just, I love these shoes, and here's why I like them. And I've really been able to increase my weight training, right? My deadlift. And they will take you, and I'm saying this as an example, that's actually what happened to me. And I was taken aside by the recruiter, and we had a solid 10-minute conversation. And I was also had the opportunity to really kind of connect with them as people. And they told me a lot about Nike culture and what they like to do. And I still am connected with these folks today, right? But if you just walk up to a recruiter, give them your resume, and then just give them your elevator pitch, how is that any different than you applying online and putting your resume in a digital basket that may never be looked at? Because you know what that recruiter's going to do? They're going to look at it, listen to you, and then put it to the side. That's no different, right? You just now have had the opportunity to do, they've done that to your face versus actually online, unfortunately. So you want to make that connection. And as you make that connection, really integrate what your skills that you bring to the table into that connection. So during that conversation, you know, she mentioned, hey, we use a lot of data to create our shoes to make sure they are a great fit and all that good stuff. And I said, oh, really? You know, because I'm a data professional. I've been in it for 12 years. I'm curious to know what kind of data you guys are looking at. And she listed a couple of things. I said, oh, okay, you know, I can see how that could be helpful, but how do you mitigate possible problems with your data like XYZ, right? And so by integrating that and having a really in-depth conversation and showing off my skills as well, which are shown on my resume, but I'm applying them, I've built up a relationship with these people who I'm still with today, right? And even online, I will still continue to help them. I'm like, hey, you know what? Nike's got a great role post, and you'll see it on my LinkedIn. I do this a lot. And it's not just because I want to work at those companies, but I'm trying to help people find a job. But I'm like, hey, you know, here's a great role, here's a great role. And recruiters notice that. They notice when you're trying to help them and be helpful, right? Because they're people too. And they see, hey, you know, she's trying to help us out, and she's not doing it for herself because she hasn't even asked me about roles. She's just trying to be a good person. I kind of want to keep in touch with her. And it's even gotten to a point where I've had recruiters reach out to me unsolicited saying, hey, you know what? You know, I'm looking at your skills. I've got this role. What do you think? I haven't asked for it. I haven't applied for the company. I've just been posting. It was a really good person. And they've reached out to me simply because I was intentional with building my network and being intentional, open, and honest and helpful. So you can add another one, be helpful, right? Here too as well. So I want to emphasize the importance of networking, but not networking just for the sake of it and just for an elevator pitch. So I'll stop there to see if there's any questions on that. And I know that that's going to be hard because we are taught to go into expos a certain way and think about it a certain way. And this is a different mind shift, but I do recommend, and I've seen it be more productive versus anything else.
Yeah, you mentioned an interesting point about, you know, attending conferences and taking advantage of the fact that you're in person as opposed to online. So I'm curious for people who don't have the opportunity for where, you know, in-person interactions are limited. So do you have suggestions for remote or hybrid work environments or situations on how to handle those?
Sure. So I would say these principles still apply, but it's going to be even more important for you to be, I would say, very open, right? The be open becomes even more important. And there's ways you can do that can work just like in person. So what makes in person so powerful is they can see your face, right? A good chunk of our communication is on our face. And so being on camera, I know is uncomfortable, but even if you're in a one-to-one meeting with, let's say, a recruiter virtually, if you can be on camera for maybe that meeting, that's great, right? And then stay off camera for the rest of the entire event and don't even care, right? And that's why it's great for you to pick 3 companies, because at that point, you're like, all right, I've got one-to-one meetings with 3 recruiters, total of 15 minutes each. That's 45 minutes of on-camera time. You can psych yourself up, spread it out, take a deep breath, possibly get on camera if you can, and then go off camera for the rest of the event and just not even care. That's what I would do. If you're really uncomfortable with being on camera, you're going to want to make sure that your emotions come out in your voice. So I tend to enunciate and I tend to vary my pitch very often when I speak. And that's because I want people to hear the emotion of what I'm trying to convey when I speak. You can't see it with this camera right now, but I actually use my hands a lot when I talk. And so when I'm doing that, I make sure I move my hands kind of like up into the camera, but I want the recruiter to see it so they can see that I'm moving my hands and they can follow along, but it's not super distracting. So then once I've done that, I'll move my hands out of the camera so I can still continue to use them, but the recruiter isn't distracted by that movement. The other thing I tend to do when it's virtually and if I'm trying to network with others, and I say recruiters a lot, it doesn't have to be a recruiter. I will go to events with no intention in any way, shape, or form of talking to a recruiter, and I just want to meet people. Right? I'm like, hey, this seems to be a really interesting event. These people are really interested in things that I like cloud, AI, and ML. I want to meet and learn from them too. Right? So I'll network with those people. And that's nothing related to the company. It's just me curious and expanding my knowledge. And so that's another way on a virtual level is to take some of that pressure off. Because talking to a recruiter can be stressful, but talking to someone who has the same interest in you, maybe not as stressful. So maybe say, I'm going to go to this virtual event. Yes, it's with the company I want to work for, but I'm not even going to try and talk to a recruiter. I want to network with other people who are attending to see how they think, what they want to talk about, what they're seeing in the job market, or if this research, what they're researching, maybe we can connect on that. And that takes some of the pressure off because then you're not saying I got to impress someone. It's more of, okay, I'm just having that conversation with that person. So those are some of the tips that I would have for virtual networking and how to really put yourself out there so that you're putting your best foot forward, just like if you were in person.
I love that because that's particularly appropriate in our situation where most of our events are online. So if you didn't hear it clearly, when you do attend our events, we do encourage people to turn on their camera if you're comfortable, and would love to practice modulating your voice and making sure people can hear you clearly.
Yeah, I've found that virtual networking does take a bit more effort, but as you get used to it, it becomes natural. Because how I'm speaking right now, I promise you that's not how I talk in reality. Everyone who's talked to me in reality knows I don't generally speak this way, and I'm not this, I don't enunciate quite like this in person. And as a matter of fact, as I listen to myself, I feel like I sound like a newscaster. But I do that because I know I'm virtual and things can be lost in translation. So that's why I speak like this here. And then when people meet me in person, they're just like, oh, they can hear my Southern accent come out a lot in person. And so there's a disconnect there that I'm having to kind of really recognize. But people it's funny, someone said, when you're online, you've got your customer service voice on. But when you're in person, you've got you're a Southern lady. I was like, well, yeah, that's how that works sometimes. So it's a very different mindset, but it has helped me, and one that I definitely tend to work with very often. That was a good question, by the way. Any other questions about virtual versus in-person networking, how to be better at that? One last thing I will add, especially about in-person networking, especially if you're going to a conference. The way I always put it is this: if you go into the conference hall and you come out with a bunch of swag, which don't get me wrong, I love swag. Swag is great. Swag is awesome. But if you just come out there with a bunch of swag, you probably didn't network well. And don't get me wrong, I can't tell you how many times I'm like, God, that water bottle is flawed. Because we all know they love to give us water bottles, right? They love a good water bottle. But I'm like, let me restrain myself because it's not on my list of people who I want to network and who I have friends with, right? Also, I tend to pack kind of light. So how am I going to get this stuff home? Right? I have to think about it. Like, how am I legitimately going to get this back on the plane? Especially since I don't want to check in another bag. So keep that in mind too, as well, if you're in person and you're networking.
Maybe it's an inverse pyramid, the number of
Yes.
water bottles is successful.
Exactly.
In
If you
networking.
have 20 water bottles, you maybe weren't so successful. I like that. It's inverse pyramid, swag versus networking effect. Any questions on that? Comments, concerns? No? Then I will say thank you. And again, opening up to questions as well. You can find me on Discord. That should actually say ARUSS_2010. That is my mistake, my typo. But I am in the Discord for W2D2. So you guys can find me there if you have questions. And if you have even questions about different things that you want to try, like resumes or job search tips, or even and I think this was brought before. I have a diabolically long list of links of helpful tips for resumes and even job search. I need to organize that and then just put in a document for everyone. But 99% of the time, if you have a question about, hey, can I find apprenticeships here or here in marketing or product, I probably have a link for it somewhere. And so if I see it, I will respond and see if I can't pull something out of the depths of my absolutely non-organized bookmark folder that's just labeled like career, which is not helping anyone. So I will try and respond to those as well.
Yeah, we are putting, well, first of all, yeah, please give Amy a huge round of applause, everybody, if you want to unmute yourself so we can all hear the claps, or you'll put in your digital. Okay, we're starting to see those happy little emojis. Yeah, so I mean, gosh, I learned so much today. I'm sure everybody else did. So
I had a question. I've heard that 85% of jobs are in the hidden job market, not actually posted, similar to what you're saying that it's easier to hire within. And I was curious if that matches your experience.
So this is what I say to that. Companies want to keep their people happy, right? And so what they'll do is they'll do kind of a hire from within, and they're post internally first. And then if not, then it is released to the public. So it's not that 85% are hidden. It's just that 85% may not be released to the public until a certain time period. Is reality. And that makes sense, right? If you work for Apple, you may see a role and you're like, wait, why didn't I have an opportunity to apply for it? I work here. I should get first dibs, right? You know, it's kind of like high school. No, not in high school, middle school. Wasn't it middle school with dibs, whatever that was? Maybe elementary school, first dibs or whatever. That's what the mindset is. And so that's what you're seeing. As you move up the ladder, especially if the goal is like C-suite. And by C-suite, I mean like chief technology officer, et cetera, a lot of that is going to be networking and showing that you are a strategic leader. So it's not that those roles are hidden. It's just that you can't just blindly apply, because they're going to look at you and go, who are you? Right? Versus you having demonstrated that and they're having that outreach. So it is a little bit different, especially once you hit that certain level. But in general, that's what you're seeing, right? When they talk about that 85%.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank everyone for coming. Until next time, just really appreciate all of you being here. And thank you again, Amy. So huge thank you.